You know that feeling when you're driving a car that costs more than most people's houses, wearing a suit that screams CEO, but the moment you pull into your parents' driveway, you feel like you're 6 years old again, and not in a nostalgic, warm, fuzzy way. I mean, in a small, insignificant, do-as-you're-told kind of way. That was me last Thanksgiving. I was behind the wheel of my Rolls-Royce Ghost. It's the Black Badge Edition, a sleek, intimidating beast of a machine that I bought for myself after closing the biggest real estate deal in Colorado history. It's my sanctuary. The cabin is silent, insulated from the world, smelling of bespoke leather and success. I worked 80-hour weeks for a decade to earn that silence. I missed parties, I missed dates, I missed sleep so that I could build an empire. But as I turned onto Elm Street, the knot in my stomach tightened. It's a physical reaction I've had since I was a teenager, the Thompson family anxiety. I parked the Ghost in the driveway right next to my dad's rusting Ford truck. The contrast was almost comical. A $400,000 symbol of power sitting next to a pile of scrap metal. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Perfect makeup, shark blazer, eyes that usually make competitors nervous. I took a deep breath, grabbed the expensive gifts from the back seat, vintage scotch for Dad, a cashmere shawl for Mom, and the newest gaming console for my brother, Brad, and stepped out. The front door opened before I even reached the porch. It wasn't a greeting. It was an ambush. "You're late, Greta," my mother said. She didn't look at the car. She didn't look at the gifts. She barely looked at me. She was wiping her hands on a stained dish towel, her face set in that permanent expression of martyrdom she's perfected over 30 years. "Hi, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving. Traffic was—" "Save it." She cut me off, turning her back. "Brad is bringing his friends over in an hour, and the kitchen is a disaster. Go change. I need you to scrub the floor and peel the potatoes. Your father spilled gravy everywhere." I stood there on the porch, holding thousands of dollars worth of gifts, feeling the cold wind bite through my blazer. "Mom, I just drove 4 hours. Can I come in and sit down for a second?" "Sit down?" She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Must be nice to sit down for a living. Some of us actually work, Greta. Now don't make me ask twice. There's an apron in the pantry." I swallowed the lump in my throat. This was the dynamic. It always has been. Outside these walls, I was Greta Thompson, CEO, a woman featured in business magazines. Inside these walls, I was just the help, the personal maid who happened to be related to them by blood. I walked inside. The house smelled of stale grease and old carpet. I put the gifts on the side table, unnoticed, unacknowledged, and went to the guest room to change. I took off my tailored suit and put on an old pair of sweatpants I kept there. I tied the apron around my waist. It felt like putting on a prison uniform. For the next 3 hours, I was on my hands and knees. I scrubbed the linoleum until my knuckles were raw. I peeled 5 pounds of potatoes. I basted the turkey. My father sat in his recliner, watching football, shouting for a beer every 20 minutes. "Greta, beer, now!" he'd yell, not even taking his eyes off the screen. And I did it. I fetched the beer. I wiped the spills. Why? Because I'm pathetic? Maybe. Or maybe because deep down, there's this broken part of me that thinks if I just work hard enough, if I serve them well enough, they'll finally look at me and say, "Good job, Greta. We love you." Then the front door slammed open. "The party has arrived!" It was Brad, my younger brother, the golden child. He's 27, unemployed, and currently finding himself, which apparently involves gambling and trying to become a crypto influencer. He walked in wearing designer sneakers that I knew he couldn't afford, followed by 2 of his loud, obnoxious friends. "Hey, Mom, something smells good," Brad shouted, hugging Mom. She melted. Her face lit up in a way it never did for me. "There's my handsome boy," she cooed, patting his cheek. "Dinner is almost ready. Go sit with your dad." Brad looked over at me. I was by the sink, covered in potato peels, sweat sticking my hair to my forehead. He didn't say hello. He didn't say thanks for the PS5 sitting on the table. He snapped his fingers. Yo, Greta, grab 3 cold ones for the boys, yeah? And make it snappy. His friend snickered. I froze. The sponge in my hand dripped soapy water onto the floor. I looked at him, this man-child who has never worked a hard day in his life. Then I looked at my mother, waiting for her to correct him, to tell him to show some respect to his sister who pays the mortgage on this house whenever they fall behind. Mom just smiled. Help your brother, Greta. He's had a long drive. A long drive? He drove 20 minutes from his girlfriend's apartment. I drove 4 hours. I opened the fridge. My hand was shaking. I wanted to smash the bottles on the floor. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I grabbed the beers, walked over, and set them on the table. Thanks, Maid, Brad whispered as I walked away, loud enough for his friends to hear, but quiet enough that Mom could pretend she didn't. I went back to the sink and turned the water on full blast so they wouldn't hear me hyperventilating. I looked out the window at my Rolls-Royce shining under the street lamp. It looked like a spaceship from another planet, a planet where I mattered. I didn't know it then, but that was the last meal I would ever cook for them. The clock was ticking down to 0, and the explosion was going to be spectacular. Dinner was an exercise in humiliation. I sat at the corner of the table, the spot usually reserved for high chairs or extra guests. Brad sat at the head, carving the turkey I had cooked, telling exaggerated stories about his investment strategies. My parents hung on his every word as if he were Warren Buffett. I picked up my food, the silence from my end of the table deafening. No one asked how my company was doing. No one asked about the Businesswoman of the Year nomination I had received last week. I was invisible, except when someone needed salt or a refill. After the pie was served and Brad's friends finally left, taking the leftover beers with them, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It got heavy, serious. Greta, come into the living room, my father said. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. I wiped the last crumb from the table and followed them. Mom and Dad sat on the sofa. Brad sat in the recliner, looking unusually sullen, picking at his cuticles. This was it. The family meeting. I knew the script. They needed money. The only question was, how much this time? $5,000 for a roof repair? $2,000 for car trouble? I sat on the ottoman, crossing my legs, trying to summon a bit of my boardroom persona. What's going on? My mother let out a dramatic sigh, the kind that usually precedes a guilt trip. We have a crisis, Greta, a family crisis, and we need you to step up. Step up? I looked at Brad. He refused to meet my eyes. What did Brad do this time? Don't you dare judge him, Dad snapped, pointing a calloused finger at me. Your brother is a victim of predatory market forces. I almost laughed. Predatory market forces? You mean he lost money on crypto or sports betting? It's complicated, Brad shouted, jumping up. I had a system. It was foolproof, but the platform... They froze my assets, and then the loan sharks... Loan sharks? My blood ran cold. Brad, who do you owe money to? It's not just the sharks, Mom intervened, her voice trembling. It's credit cards and, well, some online casinos. He was trying to win back the money to help us, Greta. He was doing it for the family. I stared at them. The delusion was absolute. How much? The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. $250,000? My father said. He said it with a straight face. I choked. Excuse me? $250,000? It covers everything, Mom said quickly, leaning forward. The debts, the interest, and a little seed money for him to start fresh. We know you have it, Greta. We've seen your car. We read the articles. You make that kind of money in your sleep. I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. The audacity was suffocating. You think I have $250,000 just lying around to throw into a furnace? Do you know how hard I work for my money? That's my capital. That's my employee's salary buffer. Family comes first, Dad roared, slamming his hand on the armrest. We sacrificed everything to raise you. We put food on the table. And now, when your brother's life is in danger, yes, these people are dangerous, Greta, you're going to lecture us about capital? I'm not lecturing, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I'm telling you, no. I've paid off his car. I paid for his college, which he dropped out of. I paid for his DUI lawyer. I am done. Brad looked up, his eyes narrowing. You're so selfish. You always have been. You think because you have that fancy degree and that big office, you're better than us. It's not about being better, Brad. It's about being responsible. Responsibility? Mom stood up now, getting in my face. Your responsibility is to this family. You are the eldest. It is your duty to take care of your brother. He is the future of this name. He's a 27-year-old man, I screamed back. Let him get a job. Let him face the consequences. If you don't pay, Dad said, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl, don't bother coming back for Christmas. Don't bother coming back at all. You're dead to us. The ultimatum hung in the air. It was the weapon they always kept in reserve. The threat of exile. For years, it had worked. The fear of being an orphan, of having no one, had made me write check after check. But looking at them now, Brad's smirk, Mom's entitlement, Dad's bullying, I felt something shift. It wasn't the snap yet, but the tension was building. I need to think, I said quietly. You have until tomorrow morning, Dad said. Fix this, Greta, or forget you have parents. I turned around and walked out of the living room. I needed air. I needed to get away from the toxicity before I suffocated. I grabbed my purse, but in my haste, I left my car keys on the kitchen counter. That mistake, leaving those keys, would change my life forever. I walked out to the porch, the cold November air hitting my flushed face like a slap. I paced back and forth, my heels clicking on the wooden slats. My mind was racing. $250,000? It wasn't that I didn't have the money. I did. But it was the principle. It was the sheer disrespect. But then the old programming kicked in. The voice of the little girl who just wanted Daddy to be proud. If I pay it, maybe this will be the last time. Maybe they'll finally respect me. Maybe Brad will actually turn his life around. It's a sickness, really. The addiction to hope in a dysfunctional family. I reached into my pocket for my keys to sit in the Rolls-Royce and think, but my pocket was empty. Damn it, I had left them on the kitchen counter next to the unwashed turkey pan. I turned back to the door. I didn't want to go back in. I didn't want to see them. So I opened the door quietly, hoping to sneak in, grab the keys, and slip out without another confrontation. The hallway was dark, but the light from the kitchen spilled out, casting long shadows. I could hear their voices. They weren't shouting anymore. They were laughing. I froze. She looked like she was going to puke, Brad's voice echoed. He was chuckling. Did you see her face when you dropped the dead to us line, Dad? Classic. She's weak, my father grunted. I heard the pop of a beer can. Greta has always been weak. She needs our approval like she needs air. She'll pay. She always pays. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they might hear it. But $250,000, Rob? Mom sounded worried, but not about me. Do you think she actually has that much liquid? Oh, she has it, Brad scoffed. I saw her bank statement on her phone once when she was in the bathroom. She's loaded. Besides, if she doesn't have cash, she can sell that stupid car. It's embarrassing anyway. Who drives a Rolls-Royce? She looks like a pimp. It doesn't matter, Mom said, and her next words burned themselves into my soul forever. Whatever she has, she owes us. We raised her, we tolerated her. Honestly, she's lucky we let her come around. She's so depressing, always talking about work, work, work. She's just a maid with a bank account, Brad said. The cruelty in his voice was casual, easy. That's all she is to us. A personal maid who pays the bills. Once I get that cash, I'm buying that condo in Miami. No more winter for me. Wait, Dad said. You're not spending it all on the condo. We need a new truck, and your mother wants that cruise. Yeah, plenty to go around, Brad laughed. Just let me handle the distressed brother act a little longer. I'll squeeze her dry. A personal maid with a bank account. That was it. That was the phrase that broke me. It wasn't a crack. It was a shatter. In that dark hallway, the Greta who yearned for love died. The Greta who cooked Thanksgiving dinner died. The Greta who cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't good enough, she vanished. In her place, something cold and sharp woke up. It was the CEO. It was the woman who negotiated with sharks in boardrooms. The woman who knew how to dismantle a failing company asset by asset. I didn't storm into the kitchen. I didn't scream. Screaming is for victims. I was done being a victim. I stepped softly into the kitchen doorway. They were all facing away from me, crowded around the kitchen island. My keys were right there, near the edge. I walked in, silent as a ghost. I reached out, grabbed the keys. The jingle of the metal made Mom turn around. Her eyes widened. She looked guilty for a split second, then her face hardened back into the mask. I thought you left, she snapped. I forgot my keys, I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears. It was flat, devoid of emotion, no tremor, no plea. Did you hear us? Brad asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I heard enough. Good, Dad challenged, puffing out his chest. Then you know the situation. Tomorrow morning, the money. I looked at my father. I looked at the man I had idolized for 30 years, and I saw nothing but a stranger, a greedy, small, pathetic stranger. I'll handle it, I said. They took that as a yes. They smiled. They thought they had won. Good girl, Mom said, turning back to the sink. Now, before you go, take the trash out. It's full. I looked at the trash can. Then I looked at them. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Excuse me? Mom turned around, shocked. I said, no. I turned on my heel. Where are you going? Dad shouted. Get back here, Greta! I walked out the front door. I walked down the porch steps. The wind didn't feel cold anymore. It felt bracing. It felt like freedom. I got into my Rolls-Royce. I started the engine. The V12 purred to life, a sound of pure, unadulterated power. I engaged the gear and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't look back. I didn't look at the house where I grew up. I didn't look at the window where I knew they were watching. I didn't cry. Tears are for people who have lost something. I realized, driving down that dark highway, that I hadn't lost anything. I had just discarded a dead weight. I wasn't going to pay them, but I wasn't just going to disappear either. Oh no. They wanted to play a game of finance? They wanted to talk about assets and liabilities? I am a chief financial officer. I destroy liabilities for a living. And the Thompson family was about to be audited. I drove straight back to the city, the speedometer rarely dipping below 80. By the time I reached my penthouse, it was 2 a.m. My apartment is on the 45th floor, overlooking the skyline. It's a fortress of glass and steel. Usually, I come here to hide. Tonight, I came here to plan a war. I didn't sleep. I brewed a pot of black coffee and went into my home office. I sat down at my desk, a massive mahogany slab that cost more than Brad's entire existence, and opened my laptop. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see what we're dealing with. I logged into my secure banking portal. Over the years, I had linked my accounts with my parents to facilitate transfers for their emergencies. They thought it was so I could give them money. They forgot that access works both ways. I had view-only access to their primary checking accounts, and, more importantly, I had their social security numbers memorized from when I set up their retirement accounts, which they had drained years ago. I started digging. First, I pulled Brad's public records. It's amazing what you can find when you pay for premium background checks. The crypto investment story was a partial lie. He had lost money on crypto, but the bulk of the $250,000 debt wasn't to loan sharks. It was to online casinos based in Malta and Curacao. He was a gambling addict, plain and simple. But then I saw something that made my blood freeze. I pulled my own credit report. I check it quarterly, but I had been so busy with the merger at work that I hadn't looked in 6 months. There were 3 credit cards opened in the last 4 months. One from Amex, one from Chase, one from Discover, all under the name Greta Thompson, all maxed out. Total balance, $85,000. I clicked on the transaction details. Rolex store, Las Vegas. VIP table service, Club 11 Miami. DraftKings deposit. OnlyFans subscription. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. Brad hadn't just asked for money. He had stolen my identity. He used my social security number, my good credit score, to fund his lifestyle. And my parents, they had to know. The billing address for these cards was their house. They had been intercepting the mail. That's why Uncle Ben, my dad's brother who works at the post office, was always so weird around me. He was in on it. He was diverting my mail to them. I picked up my phone. It was 3 a.m., but I didn't care. I called Arthur, my personal lawyer. He's a shark in a 3-piece suit who charges $800 an hour and is worth every penny. Greta? His voice was groggy. Is everything okay? Are you in jail? No, Arthur, but someone is going to be. My voice was ice cold. I need you to open a file. Identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Who is the defendant? Arthur asked, the sleep vanishing from his voice instantly. Bradley Thompson, Robert Thompson, and Linda Thompson. There was a pause on the line. Your family? No, I said, staring at the fraudulent charges on the screen. Not my family, just the defendants. Okay, Arthur said. I'm grabbing a pen. Talk to me. For the next hour, I laid it all out. The coercion, the demand for $250,000, the stolen identity. Arthur listened, occasionally humming in approval. We have them on the fraud, Arthur said. That's federal. Brad is looking at serious prison time. But Greta, if we go this route, it's nuclear war. There's no coming back. I don't want to come back, Arthur. I want to burn the bridge while they're standing on it. Understood. What's the next move? I need to secure my assets, and I need to trap them. They want $250,000 for the house, right? Or for the sharks. I need to know the status of their house. I can pull the deed of mortgage records as soon as the clerk's office opens, Arthur said. Do it. And Arthur, get me a private investigator. I want photos of Brad spending my money. I want proof of every lie. Done. Try to get some sleep, Greta. I hung up. Sleep? No. I was fueled by adrenaline and pure, unadulterated hate. I looked at the photo of my family on my desk. It was taken 5 years ago at Christmas. We were all smiling. Fake smiles. I picked up the frame and threw it into the trash can. I wasn't the maid anymore. I was the auditor, and the audit had just begun. The next morning, my phone blew up. 17 missed calls from Mom, 10 from Dad. A string of texts from Brad that ranged from begging, "Please, sis, I'm scared," to threatening, "You better not leave me hanging." I let them sweat until noon. Then I initiated phase 2, the trap. I sent a text to the group chat. "I'm arranging the funds. It's a lot of money to move quickly. I need 48 hours, but I need to secure the loan against something. I need the deed to the house to show the bank as collateral." It was a lie, of course. I didn't need a loan. I could write a check for $250,000 right now and not even blink. But I needed to see the paperwork. I needed to see how deep the rot went. Mom called immediately. "Oh, thank God, Greta. I knew you'd come through. I told your father, she's a good girl. She won't let us down." Her voice was sickly sweet. It made my skin crawl. Yesterday, I was a maid. Today, because I opened my wallet, I was a good girl. "I need the deed, Mom," I said, keeping my voice tired and defeated. I had to play the role. "The bank needs to scan it." Right, the deed," she stammered. Well, we can't exactly give you the physical deed right now." "Why not?" "Because, well, Uncle Ben has it in his safe, for safekeeping." Lies. "Mom," I said sharply, "if I don't get the document numbers, I can't get the money. Brad is on his own." Panic ensued on the other end. I heard muffled whispering. Then Dad came on the line. "Listen, Greta, the house, we took out a second mortgage on it last year to help Brad with a business venture." My jaw tightened. "A second mortgage? How much?" 80% of the equity." I closed my eyes. They had nearly mortgaged the house to the hilt to fund Brad's gambling, and now they wanted me to bail them out again? "Okay," I said, forcing calmness. "Send me the loan documents. I'll see if I can refinance it under my name to free up cash." "You'd do that?" Dad asked, sounding surprised. "You'd put the house in your name?" "It's the only way to get the cash fast, Dad." "Okay, sending them now." 10 minutes later, the email arrived. I forwarded it instantly to Arthur. "Analyze this," I typed. Arthur called me back within the hour. "Greta, you're not going to believe this." "Try me." "The mortgage isn't with a standard bank. It's a high-interest private loan from a hard money lender." Predatory stuff. But here's the kicker. They are in default. They haven't paid in 6 months. The lender has already filed a notice of default. Foreclosure is scheduled to start next week. I stared at the city below. So if I gave them the $250,000, it wouldn't even save the house, Arthur said. They owe the lender $300,000. The $250,000 would just go to Brad's gambling debts, and they'd still be homeless in a month. They were lying to me about everything. They weren't asking me to save the house. They were asking me to flush money down the toilet while the Titanic sank. "Arthur," I said, a plan forming in my mind, "who holds the note? Who is the lender?" "A company called Apex Capital, small firm." "Can the note be purchased?" Arthur paused. He knew exactly where I was going. "Distress debt? Yes, absolutely. Apex would probably be happy to sell it at a slight discount just to avoid the hassle of foreclosure litigation. They just want their money." "Buy it," I said. "Greta." "Use my shell company, GT Holdings. Contact Apex today. Offer them full face value for the note if they transfer the rights to me immediately. I want to own the mortgage." "You realize what this means?" Arthur asked softly. "You won't just be their daughter. You'll be their bank. You'll have the power to evict them." "I know," I said. "Do it." I hung up. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a dark, thrilling anticipation. They wanted to use me for my money? Fine. I would use my money to buy the one thing they couldn't afford to lose. Their roof. I looked at the text from Brad. "Sis, you're a lifesaver. Love ya." I typed back, "Working on it. Don't worry, big things are happening." I wasn't lying. The next 48 hours were a blur of wire transfers and legal documents. While my family thought I was scrambling to liquidate assets to pay their ransom, I was actually executing a hostile takeover of their lives. I sat in the conference room of Apex Capital. The manager, a greasy man named Mr. Henderson, looked at me like I was an angel sent from heaven. "Miss Thompson," he said, sliding a stack of papers across the table, "I must say, we rarely see this. Full payment for a non-performing note? You're taking a risk. The occupants, well, they're difficult. We've tried to contact them for months." "I'm aware," I said, pulling my Mont Blanc pen from my purse. "I specialize in difficult occupants." I signed the papers. Greta Thompson, CEO, GT Holdings. With the final signature, I transferred $300,000 to Apex Capital. It was a lot of money, yes, but it was the price of justice. "Congratulations," Henderson said, shaking my hand. "You now own the first lien on 1400 Elm Street. All rights of foreclosure transfer to you immediately." I walked out of that office holding a blue folder. Inside was the power of God over my parents. I got into my Rolls-Royce. I placed the folder on the passenger seat. I patted it gently. Now I had everything I needed. 1. Evidence of Brad's identity theft, thanks to the PI. 2. Evidence of the stolen college fund. Arthur found the trail. Dad had liquidated the account I set up for my late brother's son. 3. The deed to the house. My phone rang. It was Mom. "Greta, it's been 48 hours. Do you have the money? Brad's creditors are getting impatient." "I have it," I said calmly, "but I'm not transferring it." "What?" her voice shrieked. "You promised." "I can't transfer that amount over the phone, Mom. It's flagged for security. I have to bring a cashier's check in person." "Oh," she exhaled. "Okay, yes, come over. Bring the check. We're having a little get-together." "A get-together?" "Yes, your Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben are here, and Cousin Rachel. We wanted to support Brad, and, well, we need to talk to you about some behavioral issues." I almost laughed out loud. They were gathering the flying monkeys. They were planning an intervention for me. They wanted to gang up on me to ensure I kept the money flowing in the future. "Perfect," I said. "I'd love to see everyone. I'll be there in 2 hours." "Drive safe," she said. "And Greta, don't wear that expensive suit. It makes people uncomfortable. Wear something modest." "I'll wear whatever I want, Mom." I hung up. I drove home and changed. I put on my sharpest, most aggressive power suit, a white Alexander McQueen that cost more than their car. I put on my diamond studs. I grabbed the blue folder and the USB drive containing the PI's evidence. I looked in the mirror. The maid was gone. The executioner was here. I drove the Rolls-Royce back to the suburbs. The drive felt different this time. No anxiety, only focus. When I pulled up, the driveway was full of rusty sedans and pickup trucks. The whole clan was there. I parked the Ghost right in the middle of the lawn, crushing Mom's prize hydrangeas. I stepped out. The front door opened. It was Aunt Carol. "Greta," she sneered. "Nice parking. You think you own the place?" I smiled, a shark's smile. "As a matter of fact, Carol," I whispered to myself, "I do." I walked up the steps, clutching the blue folder. It was time for the show. The living room was crowded and smelled of cheap casserole and judgment. My parents sat on the main sofa like a king and queen presiding over a court. Brad was next to them, looking pathetic and misunderstood. Aunt Carol, Uncle Ben, the mail thief, and Cousin Rachel were scattered around on folding chairs. As I entered, conversation stopped. All eyes landed on my white suit. "You're late," Dad grunted. Again. "I was busy," I said, remaining standing. "Hello, everyone." "Sit down, Greta," Mom commanded, pointing to a small wooden stool in the corner. "Not a chair, a stool." "I'll stand," I said. "I have the check." I patted my purse. Brad's eyes lit up. "You got it? The $250K? "I have a check," I corrected. "But before I hand it over, Mom said you wanted to talk about my behavioral issues?" Aunt Carol cleared her throat. She's the self-appointed moral guardian of the family, despite having 3 divorces. "Greta, we're all very concerned about you. You've become cold." "Materialistic." "Materialistic?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yes," Uncle Ben chimed in. "Driving that flashy car while your brother is suffering. It's obscene. Family helps family. We heard how you spoke to your parents on Thanksgiving. Disrespectful." "We just want to help you find your way back to Jesus," Mom said, clutching a Bible, "and back to your family duties. You've been corrupted by money, Greta. You think you're better than us." "We've decided," Dad announced, standing up, "that in addition to paying Brad's debt, you need to turn over control of your finances to me, for your own good. I'll manage your accounts to make sure you're spending your money Christianly." The room nodded in agreement. I looked around at them. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. They didn't just want the money. They wanted to break me. They wanted to strip me of my autonomy so I would never threaten leaving again. "So," I said, my voice calm, "let me get this straight. I'm the bad guy because I work hard, and Brad is the victim because he gambled away money he didn't have?" "It's an illness," Mom cried. "He has an illness. You're heartless." "And you, Greta," Cousin Rachel piped up from the back, "you didn't even visit when Grandma was sick." "I paid for her hospice care, Rachel," I shot back, "while you were stealing her pain meds." Rachel gasped, "You liar!" "Enough!" Dad shouted. "Give us the check, Greta, and apologize to your brother for making him wait." "Apologize?" I asked. "On your knees," Brad sneered, feeling emboldened by the crowd. "Beg for forgiveness for being a bad sister?" The room was silent. They actually expected me to do it. They expected the maid to reappear. I looked at Brad. I looked at the smug satisfaction on his face. "You want to talk about who I am?" I asked, reaching into my bag. "You called me a maid with a bank account. Remember that?" Mom went pale. "Well," I continued, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the living room's Bluetooth speaker system, which I had bought them last Christmas. "Let's hear what else you have to say." "What are you doing?" Dad demanded. "Sharing," I said, "since we're having a family meeting." I pressed play. My voice from the recording filled the room crystal clear over the surround sound. "She's just a maid with a bank account. That's all she is to us, a personal maid who pays the bills. Once I get that cash, I'm buying that condo in Miami." Brad's voice boomed through the speakers. The color drained from Brad's face. Aunt Carol looked confused. I didn't stop. I let the recording play. Mom's voice. "Whatever she has, she owes us. Honestly, she's lucky we let her come around. She's so depressing." Dad's voice. "She needs our approval like she needs air. She'll pay. She always pays." I hit pause. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. "That," I said, pointing at the speaker, "is what you really think of me. Not a daughter, not a sister, an ATM, a maid." That was taken out of context," Mom stammered, standing up. "We were stressed." "Stressed?" I laughed. "Okay, let's talk about stress. Let's talk about the credit cards." I pulled the papers from the PI out of my bag and threw them onto the coffee table. photos of Brad at the casino, copies of the credit card applications with my forged signature. "You stole my identity, Brad," I said, my voice raising slightly. "You opened 3 credit cards in my name. That's a federal crime, wire fraud, identity theft." Brad shrank back into the sofa. I was going to pay you back." "With what?" I asked. "With the money from the college fund?" I threw the next document down. It was the bank transfer record showing Dad emptying the savings account I had set up for our late brother's son, little Timmy. "I put $50,000 in that account for Timmy's education," I said, turning to Uncle Ben. "And you helped them drain it, didn't you, Ben? You notarized the withdrawal." Uncle Ben looked down at his shoes. "You stole from an orphan," I said, looking at my father. "To fund his gambling," I pointed at Brad. "It was a loan," Dad roared. "We were going to put it back." "You are thieves," I said, my voice cold and hard. "You are liars, and you are done." "You ungrateful brat!" Dad lunged toward me, his face purple with rage. "Get out of my house. Get out and don't come back until you have that check." "Your house?" I asked. I held up the blue folder, the ultimate weapon. "That's the funny thing, Dad. I did bring a check today. A check for $300,000. "Give it here," Brad yelled. "I didn't give it to you," I smiled. "I gave it to Apex Capital." Dad froze. "What?" "I bought your mortgage," I said. "I bought the note you've been defaulting on for 6 months. I opened the folder and held up the transfer of lien. "I own this house, Dad. I am the bank. I am the landlord. And you," I looked around the room at the stunned relatives, "you are trespassing." You can't do that," Mom whispered. "You're our daughter." "No," I said. "I'm the maid, and the maid is cleaning house." I pulled out my phone. "I have the police on speed dial. They are waiting down the street. Brad, they have a warrant for your arrest for identity theft. And Mom, Dad, I'm serving you with an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate my property." "You wouldn't?" Dad challenged. "You don't have the guts." "Try me," I said. And I pressed the call button. The moment I pressed the call button on my phone, the atmosphere in the room shifted from aggression to a terrified, suffocating silence. It was the sound of a bomb having been dropped, and everyone waiting for the shockwave. My father's face went from a furious purple to a ghostly ash-gray white. He looked at the phone in my hand as if it were a loaded gun. "You're bluffing," Brad stammered, though his voice cracked. He stood up, his hands trembling. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother. You're just trying to scare us. Mom, tell her to stop." I held the phone up so they could see the screen. 911, call in progress. "Operator," I said clearly into the speakerphone, my eyes locked on Brad. "I am at 1402 Elm Street. I have an intruder who is refusing to leave and a suspect involved in federal identity theft who is currently becoming aggressive. I need immediate assistance." "No," Mom screamed. She didn't lunge at me. She lunged at Dad. "Robert, do something. She's actually doing it." Dad looked at me, his eyes pleading for the first time in my life. The arrogance was gone. The king of the castle facade had crumbled. "Greta, hang up right now. We can fix this. We can talk about the house. We can talk about the money." "We're done talking, Dad," I said calmly. "I tried talking. I tried helping. I cooked your food. I paid your bills. And you called me a maid. You stole my identity. You stole from a dead man's son. I was going to pay it back." Brad yelled, his desperation turning into a manic rage. He looked around the room like a trapped animal. "Uncle Ben, tell her. We had a plan." Uncle Ben, the mail thief, suddenly found the pattern on the rug incredibly interesting. He shrank back into his folding chair, muttering, I didn't know about the credit cards, Brad. I just handed over the mail. I didn't know. You coward, shrieked. The operator's voice came through the phone. Ma'am, officers are already en route to your location regarding the warrant. They are 1 minute away. 1 minute. Brad's face twisted. He realized there was no way out. He looked at the back door, then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw pure, unadulterated hatred. It wasn't the look of a brother. It was the look of a parasite realizing its host was cutting it off. You ruined everything, he screamed, grabbing a heavy crystal vase from the coffee table, a vase I had bought Mom for her birthday 3 years ago. He raised it, stepping toward me. Brad, no, Aunt Carol shrieked. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood my ground in my white Alexander McQueen suit, clutching the deed to the house. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady. Add assault with a deadly weapon to the list, Brad. Make sure you never see the outside of a prison cell again. He froze. His arm shook. He wanted to throw it. He wanted to hurt me because I had taken away his power. But he saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. He didn't see Greta, the sister. He didn't see Greta, the victim. He saw Greta, the CEO. He saw a wall of ice that he couldn't break. The sound of sirens cut through the air. First faint, then loud, then deafening. Blue and red lights began to flash against the living room curtains, illuminating the terror on my parents' faces in strobe light pulses. Brad dropped the vase. It shattered on the floor, exploding into 1,000 pieces. It's over, I whispered. Mom collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing hysterically. My baby, my boy. Robert, hide him in the attic. Linda, stop it, Dad snapped, his survival instinct kicking in. The police are outside. If we hide him, we go to jail too. We're already going to jail if she presses charges for the college fund, Mom wailed, pointing an accusing finger at me. You demon! You ungrateful demon! How could you do this to your family? I watched them turn on each other. It was fascinating in a morbid way. As long as I was the common enemy, they were a united front. But the moment real consequences arrived, badges and guns and handcuffs, the loyalty evaporated. There was a heavy pounding on the front door. Police! Open up! The room froze. No one moved. I'll get it, I said. I walked past my sobbing mother, past my paralyzed father, past my trembling brother. I walked to the door of the house I now owned. I opened it wide. 3 officers stood there. Behind them, 2 more squad cars were pulling up. The neighbors were coming out onto their porches, watching the spectacle. Miss Thompson? The lead officer asked. That's me, I said. The man you want is in the living room. His name is Bradley Thompson, and I also have eviction notices to serve to the other 2 occupants. The officer nodded. We have the warrant. Step aside, ma'am. I stepped out onto the porch. The cold air hit my face, but this time I felt warm. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. I watched through the open door as the officers marched into the living room. I saw them grab Brad. I saw him struggle, then go limp as they slammed him against the wall to cuff him. You have the right to remain silent, the officer shouted over Mom's screaming. It was chaotic. It was loud. It was ugly. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. You know, a lot of people tell you to take the high road. They tell you to forgive and forget. But sometimes the high road just leads you off a cliff. Sometimes you have to stand in the mud and fight back. I stood there on that porch, listening to the cuffs click, and I knew I had made the right choice. I wasn't just saving my finances, I was saving my soul. The police dragged Brad out of the house. He was crying now, ugly, snotty tears. The bravado was gone. The crypto investor persona had vanished, leaving behind a scared little boy who had never been told no in his life until today. "Greta, help me!" he screamed as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. "I'm sorry. I'll pay you back. Don't let them take me." I stood by the pillar of the porch, my arms crossed. I didn't look away. I forced myself to watch. I needed to remember this moment the next time I felt guilty. "Tell it to the judge, Brad," I said softly. Mom ran out after him, clutching Dad's arm. "Officer, please, it's a misunderstanding. My daughter she's mentally unstable. She's vindictive. She set him up." The officer ignored her, slamming the car door shut. Then the focus turned to my parents. They stood on the lawn, the blue lights washing over them. The neighbors, Mrs. Higgins from next door, the Johnsons from across the street, were all watching. My parents, who cared so much about appearance, about looking like the perfect Christian family, were being exposed for exactly what they were. Dad turned to me. He tried to muster up some of his old authority, but his voice shook. "You happy now? You destroyed this family. You sent your brother to prison." "He sent himself to prison, Dad," I said, walking down the steps to face them. "He committed the crimes. You enabled him. You watched him steal my identity and you laughed about it. You called me a maid." "We were angry," Dad shouted. "Family says things when they're angry. It doesn't mean you evict us. Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know," I said, "and frankly, I don't care. But you can't stay here. This is my property." I signaled to the other officer, the one I had spoken to about the eviction. In my state, if there is a hostile situation and clear ownership, I can request an emergency removal, especially since they were technically squatting on a foreclosed property that I had purchased. "These people are trespassing," I told the officer. "I want them removed from the premises. They can contact my lawyer to arrange a time to pick up their belongings under police supervision." "Greta, please," Mom wailed, dropping to her knees on the grass. She actually grabbed the hem of my pants. "Don't do this. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you." I looked down at her. I remembered all the time she made me scrub the floor while she watched TV. I remembered her laughing when Brad mocked me. I remembered her telling me I was depressing. "You gave birth to a servant," I said, pulling my leg away. "You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a retirement plan." I turned to the officer. "Get them off my property." The humiliation was absolute. My parents, who had spent their lives judging everyone else, were escorted to their rusty truck by the police. They weren't arrested yet, but they were cast out. Dad glared at me through the window of his truck as he started the engine. "You'll rot in hell for this, Greta." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll have a nice house." They drove away, their tailpipe dragging on the asphalt, sparks flying. Aunt Carol and the rest of the flying monkeys scrambled to their cars, terrified that I might turn my laser focus on them next. They didn't say a word. They just fled. Silence returned to Elm Street. I stood alone on the lawn. The police cars drove away with Brad. The neighbors went back inside, whispering. I looked at the house. It looked different now. It didn't look looming or scary. It just looked small. It was just a pile of bricks and wood. The power it held over me was gone. I walked back inside. The air was still thick with the tension of the confrontation. The shattered vase was still on the floor. The half-eaten casserole was still on the table. I walked into the kitchen. I saw the apron hanging on the hook, the apron Mom had forced me to wear just yesterday. I took it off the hook. I walked over to the trash can. I threw it in. Then I walked to the fridge. I opened a bottle of the expensive champagne I had brought for them, the one they hadn't even bothered to open because they were too busy demanding cash. I poured myself a glass. I sat at the head of the table, Dad's seat. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. But this wasn't the end. Oh no. The cleanup was just beginning. I had to scrub this life clean of them. I had to ensure that Brad stayed behind bars and that my credit was restored. I pulled out my phone and called Arthur. "It's done," I said. "Brad is in custody. The parents are gone." "Good," Arthur said. "I'll have the restraining orders filed by morning." "And Greta?" "Yeah? I'm proud of you." I smiled, tears finally pricking my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. "Thanks, Arthur. Now let's talk about selling this house. I don't want to keep it. It smells like betrayal." "We'll list it tomorrow," he promised. I finished my champagne, locked the door, and walked back to my Rolls-Royce. I didn't look back at the house. I got in, turned on the heated seats, and drove away. The maid was dead. The queen had returned to her throne. The next 5 months were a whirlwind of legal battles and logistical purges. Brad's trial was short. With the mountain of evidence I provided, the IP addresses from the casinos, the forged signatures, the testimony from the bank manager, and the recorded confession from the living room, his public defender didn't have a leg to stand on. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. The judge, a stern woman who had clearly seen enough spoiled young men in her courtroom, sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison. I was there when the gavel came down. Brad looked at me, mouthing please, but I just checked my watch. I had a board meeting to get to. Mom and Dad didn't fare much better. Without the house, and with their reputation in the community shattered, news travels fast in the suburbs, they had to move. They couldn't afford an apartment in our town. They ended up moving 2 towns over into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a complex that sits right next to the highway. I heard through the grapevine, aka Aunt Carol, who suddenly wanted to be my best friend once she realized I was the only one with money, that Dad had to go back to work as a greeter at a hardware store. Mom was taking in sewing. They were living the life they had always looked down on. As for the house on Elm Street, I didn't keep it. I didn't want their ghosts haunting me. I hired a cleaning crew to strip it bare, dumping every piece of furniture, every old photo, every knick-knack into a dumpster. Then I renovated it. I tore down the walls that separated the kitchen from the living room, letting the light in. I replaced the gloomy carpets with hardwood. I sold it for $150,000 profit. I took that money and donated every cent to a charity that helps young women escape financial abuse. It felt poetic. The house that was a prison for me became the key to freedom for someone else. But the biggest change wasn't in my bank account. It was in my heart. About 3 months after the purge, I was at a charity gala in Seattle. I was standing by the bar, sipping sparkling water, feeling a bit out of place despite my success. I was still getting used to the idea that I didn't have to apologize for existing. "That's a terrifying look," a voice said beside me. I turned. A man was standing there. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, and a smile that reached his eyes. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing a sharp, dark suit that looked effortless. "Excuse me?" I asked, my defenses going up. "You look like you're analyzing the room for structural weaknesses," he laughed. "I'm Julian. I'm an architect." "Greta," I said, "and I usually analyze balance sheets, not buildings." "Ah, a finance warrior." He clinked his glass against mine. "I saw you pull up in that Ghost out front. Black badge, right? V12 engine?" I smiled. Most men were intimidated by my car, or they judged it. "Yes, it's my baby." "Nice," Julian nodded appreciatively. "I'm a Porsche guy myself. 911 Turbo S. Maybe we can race sometime, though I think I'd take you on the corners." We talked for hours. We didn't talk about the weather. We talked about ambition. We talked about the pressure of building something from nothing. I found out Julian had cut ties with his toxic family years ago. He understood. He didn't look at me with pity when I briefly mentioned my brother in prison. He looked at me with respect. You survived, he said simply, and you didn't let them turn you into one of them. That night, he drove me home. He didn't try to impress me with money. He knew I had my own. He impressed me with kindness. He opened the door for me. He listened. A few weeks later, we were having dinner at my penthouse. I was cooking, something I hadn't done since that Thanksgiving. I was making risotto. Julian came into the kitchen. He saw me stirring the pot. "Hey," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "What are you doing? Cooking dinner?" "No," he said, gently taking the wooden spoon from my hand. "You cooked all day at work. Sit down, drink your wine. I'll finish this." I froze. The old panic flared up. "No, I have to. I need to be useful." Julian looked at me. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "Greta, you don't have to earn your dinner here. You don't have to serve me. We are partners. Sit down." I sat at the counter. I watched this man, this successful, kind, handsome man, stir the rice, humming to himself. He poured me more wine. He asked me about my day. For the first time in 34 years, I wasn't the maid. I wasn't the bank. I was just Greta, and that was enough. I looked out the window at the city lights. I thought about my parents in their cramped apartment, bitter and alone. I thought about Brad and his cell, and I took a deep breath. I had burned my life down to the ground, and from the ashes, I had built something real, something diamonds are made of, pressure and time. 3 years have passed since the Elm Street purge. My life today is unrecognizable from the life of the woman who scrubbed floors in a Thanksgiving apron. I married Julian last spring. We didn't have a big wedding. We eloped to Lake Como, Italy. Just us, the mountains, and a vintage wooden boat. No drama, no screaming relatives, just peace. We have a daughter now. Her name is Maya. She's 6 months old. Sometimes when I hold her, I feel a terrifying wave of love. I look at her tiny hands, her innocent eyes, and I think about my own mother. I wonder how she could have looked at me and seen a burden. I wonder how she could have chosen a gambling addict over the child who just wanted to please her. But I don't let those thoughts stay long. I have broken the cycle. Maya will never know what it feels like to be an ATM. She will never know what it feels like to be a personal maid for her family. She will know responsibility, yes. She will know the value of $1. But she will also know that she is loved simply because she exists, not because of what she can provide. I haven't seen my parents in 3 years. I do know where they are. I have a standing order with a grocery delivery service to send them basic food staples once a week. Milk, bread, eggs, vegetables. No cash. Never cash. Just enough so they don't starve. Arthur, my lawyer, handles it. He tells me that every time the delivery arrives, Dad curses my name to the delivery driver. He tells everyone who will listen that his ungrateful daughter abandoned him. I let him talk. His words can't reach me up here. Last week, I received a letter from prison. The handwriting was messy. It was Brad. I stood by the kitchen island holding the envelope. Julian walked in, saw my face, and knew instantly. "You don't have to open it," he said, kissing my temple. "I know," I said. I looked at the envelope. Inmate number 89402. I thought about curiosity. I thought about closure. But then I realized I already had closure. Closure isn't an apology from the people who hurt you, because they never will apologize. Closure is accepting that they will never change and moving on without them. I walked over to the fireplace. I tossed the unopened letter into the flames. We watched the paper curl and blacken. We watched the ink disappear. "Ready to go?" Julian asked. "The reservations are at 7. "Ready," I said. We walked out to the garage. My Rolls-Royce Ghost was parked next to his Porsche 911. We stood there for a second, debating. "Let's take yours," I said. "I feel like driving fast tonight." He tossed me the keys. As we roared down the highway, the wind in my hair, my husband laughing beside me, I realized the ultimate truth of my journey. They tried to make me a servant, but in doing so, they taught me how to work harder than anyone else. They tried to steal my money, but in doing so, they taught me the value of protecting myself. They tried to break me, but they only forged me into steel. I am not a victim of the Thompson family. I am the survivor of it. And looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, because the fire they threw me into is the fire that lit the way to my freedom. So to anyone out there listening who feels like they are the maid of their family, to anyone who feels like they are only loved for what they provide, to anyone scared to say no, listen to me. You are not a transaction. You are a person, and you have the power to walk away. It will be hard. It will be scary. But on the other side of that door, there is a life so beautiful you can't even imagine it yet. Don't wait for them to change. They won't. Change yourself. Grab the keys to your own life and drive. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you want to hear more stories about justice and turning the tables, click on the next video on the screen right now. I'll see you there.